I was 22 and invisible. No one remembered my name. Not the receptionist, not the senior staff, and certainly not Ryan Carter, the golden boy of Silverloop Technologies. I was the summer intern who fetched coffee and took notes in meetings no one wanted me in. But that didn't bother me. Not at first. I was there to learn, to observe, to soak in everything I could. Until I made the mistake of speaking. It was a Thursday afternoon. The conference room smelled like burnt espresso and stress. Ryan was leading a product brainstorming session and tossing out half-baked ideas that everyone nodded along to like mindless parrots. I raised my hand. Nervously. Quietly. And when he gave me the floor, probably expecting a bland comment about fonts, I pitched an idea I'd been refining in my notebook for weeks. A real-time collaboration platform for freelancers and clients, streamlined and intuitive, filling the gap between bloated project management tools and chaotic email threads. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Then Ryan laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-bodied, cruel laugh that echoed off the glass walls. Right, he said, because interns who deliver coffee know how to build scalable tech. That was adorable, Lily. Truly. I wanted to disappear. The laughter in the room grew louder as my face burned. Someone muttered something about me shooting my shot. I wasn't even given a chance to explain. Ryan turned back to the whiteboard like I never spoke. The next morning, I turned in my badge and left without saying goodbye. I told myself it didn't matter. That I wasn't going to cry over some arrogant executive who wore designer sneakers and liked the sound of his own voice. But the truth is, I did cry. I cried on the subway. I cried at home. And then, eventually, I stopped crying and started building. I worked nights at a diner to afford rent and days at a small co-working space where I coded, designed, and pitched the very platform Ryan mocked. I taught myself how to secure funding. How to pitch without flinching. How to smile when people said no. And eventually, someone said yes. Then another. And another. 2 years later, I launched my app under the name Nova. Within 6 months, we hit 50,000 users. By the end of year 1, I was fielding acquisition offers. But I didn't sell. Not yet. Not until I was sure I'd built something they couldn't ignore. I watched Silverloop from afar. Ryan's face still popped up on tech blogs and panels, still talking big ideas and buzzwords. But I saw the signs. His startup was pivoting too often. Losing talent. Burning cash. I knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks turned into collapse. So I waited. And when the opportunity came, I made my move. A new funding round. Quiet desperation behind a flashy pitch. I created a shell investment group and extended an anonymous offer. Enough to keep the company afloat. Enough to keep Ryan hoping. But with terms that gave me majority control. He agreed within days. I watched the Zoom call where he toasted to his mystery angel with cheap whiskey and fake bravado. And I smiled. Because Ryan Carter had no idea that the intern he humiliated was now the one holding the leash. The months after I left Silverloop felt like falling through fog. I had no job, no degree yet, and no confidence. I remember sitting in a crumbling apartment with a leaky faucet and a broken heater, staring at the blinking cursor of my laptop, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe I was just an intern who didn't know her place. But somewhere under the doubt was a fire I couldn't extinguish. His laugh haunted me. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because it underestimated me. And I decided I would never let someone laugh me out of a room again. I picked up shifts at a late-night diner 3 blocks from my apartment, serving coffee and stale pie to exhausted grad students and bitter regulars. I saved every tip, every cent, and spent my off hours in a dusty co-working space that smelled like burnt toast and dreams. It wasn't glamorous. I showered at the gym and lived off microwave noodles. But I had my laptop. I had my notes. And I had something Ryan would never see coming, time and hunger. I started building my platform from scratch. The same one I pitched in that boardroom. But this time I didn't need their approval. I sketched out wireframes, studied UX patterns, learned front-end frameworks and back-end integrations. I cold emailed developers on Reddit, posted on freelancer boards, begged for feedback, iterated again and again. When I needed help with the legal side, I found a retired lawyer who traded advice for coffee. When I needed server space, I bartered design work for hosting credits. Every small win was a brick in the foundation. I called it Nova. A name that meant rebirth. Light from an explosion. I liked the symbolism. When I launched the beta, I expected maybe a dozen users. I got 500 in a week. Mostly freelancers and digital nomads desperate for a platform that didn't treat them like second-class citizens. Word spread. Forums lit up. And suddenly, I was scheduling Zoom calls at 2 a.m. with angel investors who were intrigued by Nova's velocity. I wore the same blouse to every call and pretended my apartment wasn't doubling as a closet. I learned to talk in numbers and narratives. By the third month, I had seed funding. Real money. Enough to hire 2 devs, bring on a marketing lead, and quit the diner job for good. I remember my last shift. One of the regulars gave me a crumpled $5 tip and told me I had kind eyes. I thanked him, walked out, and never looked back. Nova's growth exploded. Not overnight, but faster than I could keep up with. We hit our first big milestone, 50,000 users. Then 100,000. I saw reviews from people in countries I'd never been to. Freelancers landing gigs. Clients raving about efficiency. Every dashboard update felt like a victory. I watched Silverloop from the shadows. Ryan's company, once a golden child in the tech world, was changing directions like a spinning compass. He pivoted products, changed leadership, rebranded twice. I recognized the signs. Scrambling. Losing focus. Desperation disguised as innovation. I could have ignored it. Could have moved on and focused on my own success. But that wasn't the story I wanted to write. Because the girl he humiliated in that glass-walled room wasn't just gone, she had evolved. Into someone smarter. Sharper. Wealthier. And still invisible. But this time, by choice. So when Ryan's startup sent out quiet feelers for a funding round, one last attempt to stay afloat, I saw it as fate knocking. I created a shell company, a name that sounded old money and safe. We submitted a funding offer. Generous terms on paper, but with control hidden in the fine print. Majority stake. Board control. Creative oversight. I expected pushback. Due diligence. Questions. But Ryan accepted within a week. I watched the call where he celebrated with his skeleton crew, talking about how their angel had arrived. He didn't know that Angel once delivered him coffee. He didn't know she now owned his company. And I wasn't done yet. This wasn't about the money. It was about control. It was about the long game. Because Ryan Carter was about to learn exactly how much power the intern he ignored now held in her hands. There's a peculiar power in anonymity. People speak freely when they think no one important is listening. They reveal things. They relax their guard. And when you're invisible by design, you can move the chess pieces without anyone suspecting your hand. By the time Ryan signed the term sheet, I was already several steps ahead. The shell company I used, Archer Hollow Capital, had a fabricated history, complete with a board of stand-ins, a website, and years of fake press mentions I paid to plant. It looked real because it had to. Because I didn't want him just taking my money, I wanted him to believe he needed it. I didn't join meetings. I didn't speak. I let a proxy handle communication. The emails were dry, transactional, and firm. And behind them, I watched. Ryan didn't recognize the noose tightening. Not yet. But I did. He still strutted like the CEO he used to be, slick hair, sharp suits, loud optimism. But the company wasn't his anymore. On paper, sure, he still held a title. But I had voting rights. Decision power. I was on every committee. Every hire. Every product pitch. And slowly, I began to turn the screws. I replaced one of his co-founders with a consultant I trusted. I restructured the product team. I started pushing for cuts in departments that protected his bad ideas. At first, Ryan resisted. He sent long, defensive memos. He argued in meetings. He tried charming our proxy investor with slick one-liners and empty promises. But every time, the answer came back the same: per contract terms, the decision stands. I knew it drove him crazy. To not know who was behind the curtain. To not be able to pitch or persuade or manipulate his way back to power. That was the point. I wanted him to feel small. Powerless. Like I had that day in the conference room. Meanwhile, Nova was thriving. My face still wasn't public, but the app had become a staple in the freelance economy. We were being studied by business schools. Mentioned on startup podcasts. I even received a quiet acquisition offer from a competitor, a $1 billion number. I turned it down. Not because it wasn't tempting. But because I wasn't finished with Ryan yet. Watching him flail was addictive. He launched a new feature, something half-baked and stolen from another app. It flopped. He lost another senior developer. Then a marketing lead. The anonymous investor, me, began requesting bi-weekly progress reports. Ryan was forced to perform like a puppet, dancing for someone he couldn't see. But there was one moment I didn't expect. One night, reviewing security footage from a team offsite, I watched him alone on a rooftop patio with a drink in his hand, staring out at the city. He didn't look confident. He looked lost. Tired. He whispered something, maybe to himself, maybe to the wind. I replayed the footage 4 times trying to catch it. I only caught 2 words. She's winning. That was the first time I thought he might suspect. Maybe not fully. But enough to feel it. The shift. The control. The invisible hand shaping his world. I should have felt satisfaction. But instead, I felt something else. Not pity. Not regret. Just a strange, hollow ache that came from holding on to revenge for so long it started to feel like identity. I reminded myself of who he was. What he'd done. And what I promised myself that day when I walked out of Silver Loop with tears on my cheeks. He didn't just laugh at me. He made me doubt my worth. Humiliation like that stains you. So I kept going. I approved a merger discussion, one that would gut his autonomy. I rewrote his product roadmap. I cut the staff he trusted most. And still, he danced. Still, he smiled on LinkedIn and posted motivational nonsense about resilience and founder grit. I almost admired it. But admiration was dangerous. This wasn't about redemption. It was about reckoning. And it was almost time. Because we had a product launch coming up. Big press. Big stakes. And I had one last move to play. One that would force him to see me. Not as an intern. Not as an idea. But as the woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes of his arrogance, and now stood quietly above him, watching it all unfold. The public didn't see the unraveling. That's how it always is. From the outside, everything looked sleek and steady. The website gleamed with mock confidence. The social media pages boasted updates and hiring notices. But I knew the truth. The burn rate was astronomical. Key staff were leaving quietly, some with polite LinkedIn posts, others without a word. Internal surveys showed declining morale. Investors were starting to ask the questions Ryan couldn't answer. And still, he kept up the show. I almost respected the hustle. Almost. Because behind the scenes, he was drowning. It started with the product delays. His team, what was left of it, couldn't hit deadlines. Ryan had pivoted too many times, chasing trends instead of building something real. I had our legal team enforce accountability clauses in the funding agreement. He would receive a gentle but firm email each time they slipped, reminding him who now controlled the purse strings. He stopped replying to those. The silence was louder. I kept my distance but monitored everything. The emails. The team threads. The recorded investor calls where Ryan tried, desperately, to paint their stagnation as strategy. I noticed how often he used the word innovation. How little substance followed. He pitched a new feature, something AI adjacent, in a last-ditch effort to grab attention. It didn't make sense, technically or strategically, and the dev team quietly pushed back. But Ryan overruled them. It launched 2 weeks later. And crashed within 3 days. That was the first time I heard the tremble in his voice. He did a public livestream to address the issue. The backdrop was his usual branded office. But his suit was wrinkled. His eyes were tired. There was a shake in his hand as he held the mic. These things happen in fast-paced environments, he said, smiling too wide. We learn. We evolve. We come back stronger. I watched the live comments roll in, some supportive, most skeptical. One in particular caught my eye. Is this the same guy who laughed at an intern's pitch 3 years ago? I stared at it, unmoving. Then I typed a response under an anonymous account. Maybe that intern built something better. I logged off before I could second-guess it. That week, his lead designer quit. I already knew she would. I'd sent her a job offer through one of my other companies. Double the salary. Remote. Equity. She accepted within a day. Ryan didn't make it public. But I heard through back channels that he threw a glass at the wall in his office. It was happening. I pushed forward with structural changes. I froze budgets. Reassigned projects. Delayed approvals. Ryan's internal memos grew more frantic. He held motivational huddles to keep morale from collapsing. I had access to the recordings. One of them nearly made me laugh out loud. Every company faces storms, he said, pacing like a preacher. And every storm is a chance to rebuild. Our investor believes in us. Whoever they are, they see our potential. I whispered into the silence of my apartment, I see everything. The final blow of the quarter came when the press leaked that two of his competitors had merged, offering a product nearly identical to his latest roadmap. He tried to spin it. I could see the panic in his emails to the board. This is a good thing. It validates our space. Translation, we got beat to market. The board demanded an emergency strategy meeting. Ryan begged for more runway. He pitched expansion. Partnerships. Anything but the thing he feared most, losing control. He still didn't know that control was already gone. I instructed my proxy to request an operational review. Ryan complied. He had no choice. When the report came back, it was worse than I expected. Missed goals. Overhiring. Poor retention. A negative NPS score. Customers fleeing to competitors. It wasn't just that he was losing. It was that he didn't know how to stop the bleeding. But I wasn't ready to reveal myself. Not yet. There was one more piece I needed to move. The upcoming product launch. He'd staked everything on it. Investors, employees, press, everyone was watching. He called it the company's rebirth. He even sent out personal invites to former colleagues and early mentors. And, to my amusement, he sent one to me. Well, not to me, exactly. To the anonymous investor he believed had saved him. It was an embossed card. Gold foil. Formal language. We would be honored to finally welcome our angel to the family. Join us at the launch that will redefine our future. I framed it. Because that was the moment I knew exactly how this story would end. I would walk in through the front doors, head held high, unrecognizable from the intern he once belittled. And I would stand on the stage he built, surrounded by the press he invited, and take back every ounce of dignity he tried to strip from me. The intern he ignored was gone. And in her place stood the woman who owned his future. The product launch was less than a month away. Internally, Ryan framed it as a second coming, the rebirth of a company that had lost its way. To the outside world, he painted a picture of growth, innovation, and purpose. But inside the walls of that office, I knew he was running on fumes. The team was fractured. The engineers were burning out. The budget was slashed in half. And worst of all for Ryan, he no longer had final say. Every decision had to be approved through the investor channel. Through me. I'd kept myself hidden this long, but the temptation to watch up close became unbearable. I attended 2 meetings via proxy, listening in without video, voice masked through a modulation tool. Ryan still didn't suspect. If anything, he seemed flattered by my involvement. Our investor's really hands-on lately, he joked once, chuckling nervously when no one laughed back. I kept my responses minimal, precise, and clinical. But beneath the polished emails and silent calls, I watched everything. He tried to push through another experimental feature just weeks before launch. I blocked it. He tried to approve a last-minute hire from his old network. I rejected the budget. He attempted to reschedule the launch date to ensure quality. I reminded him, in the investor group chat, that deadlines were expectations, not suggestions. He was beginning to squirm. I saw it in the way his updates shifted. He stopped using words like bold and agile. He started saying viable, safe, and salvage. He still posted motivational nonsense on LinkedIn, still wore that same smug expression in company videos. But in the unfiltered internal updates, his tone wavered. And then, something happened that made me pause. He wrote me a letter. Not an email. A physical letter. Mailed directly to the proxy office we used to receive legal documents. The handwriting was rushed, the paper creased, like he'd folded and unfolded it 100 times before sending. It read, "Dear Angel, you saved us when we were seconds from shutting the doors. I don't know who you are, but I think about it more than I should. Maybe you're someone who believes in second chances. Maybe you failed once, too. Maybe you just saw something in me no one else did. Either way, I owe you. I hope I get to meet you. Not just to shake your hand. But to say thank you. For giving me another shot." Or I read it 3 times. Then set it down. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or rip it to shreds. Part of me wanted to believe there was a sliver of sincerity there. That maybe, just maybe, he'd changed. But I couldn't forget the way he looked at me back then. The way he laughed when I pitched my idea. The way he dismissed me without a second thought. This wasn't about a second chance for him. It was about taking back the first one he stole from me. The launch approached like a countdown clock ticking in my head. The venue was some renovated industrial space in the Arts District. Tall ceilings, moody lighting, exposed beams, Ryan always had a flair for presentation. He sent out invites to investors, press, influencers, and alumni. I received mine under my alias, delivered in a matte black envelope with embossed lettering. Inside was a line that made my lips curl: "We're rewriting the future. Thanks to those who believed in us when no one else did." I made my preparations. I had a designer tailor the perfect outfit, a sleek black jumpsuit with structured shoulders and a high neckline. Elegant, commanding, unforgettable. I dyed my hair a shade darker and pinned it back. I chose red lipstick, the exact shade I wore the day I interned at Silver Loop. Let him wonder if he remembered. Let the past knock once before swinging the door wide open. On the day of the launch, I arrived precisely on time. Not early. Not late. Just enough to make heads turn. I gave a different name at the door, my alias. The staff, well-trained, welcomed me with nervous energy. Someone handed me a branded cocktail. I didn't drink it. The room was buzzing with anticipation. Screens glowed with countdowns. A looping video played highlights of the company's journey, complete with dramatic piano music and fake testimonials. And then he walked in. Ryan Carter. Same confident stride. Same tailored suit. But the edges were frayed now. The confidence wasn't effortless anymore. It was an act. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. He mingled with guests, posed for photos, gave press quotes about vision and resilience. I stayed near the back, watching him move, watching the cracks show when he thought no one was looking. Then the lights dimmed. A hush fell. Ryan stepped onto the stage. He adjusted the mic. His hand trembled just slightly. "I want to thank everyone here tonight," he said, smiling toward the crowd. "But most of all, I want to thank the person who made this possible. The one who kept us alive. Our mysterious benefactor." He paused for effect. "If you're here tonight, I hope you'll make yourself known." The spotlight swept the crowd. I didn't move. Not yet. Let him stew. Let the pressure build. Because the real reveal wasn't meant to be soft. It was meant to crush. I watched as the spotlight moved on, lingering for a second too long in my direction. And I smiled. He had no idea the storm he'd invited into his launch. And I wasn't leaving until the thunder cracked. The applause faded, but the tension in the room remained. Ryan stepped off stage with that same forced smile plastered on his face, looking over the crowd like a man searching for a lifeline. He didn't know that the lifeline he was looking for was standing 15 feet away, sipping untouched champagne and planning the final act. I moved through the room quietly, shaking hands, murmuring compliments, letting the alias I'd built do the talking. I was the investor who'd saved the company, the angel who didn't ask for praise, just results. But tonight, I was done hiding. Not just from him, but from myself. Revenge had always been the goal. But now that I was here, now that the moment was on the horizon, I wanted it to sting in the exact places he thought were safe. After the launch event ended, I stayed behind. So did Ryan. He was too restless to leave. I watched him from a dark corner of the venue, speaking to the tech journalists, rambling about traction and partnerships. His voice cracked when he mentioned the roadmap. I knew why, because I had redlined most of it. Over the last few weeks, I'd used my control to slowly strip his power. I revised product decisions, reallocated funds, vetoed every move he made without explanation. He called emergency board meetings to try and regain leverage. Each time, he left more defeated. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wanted to unravel him slowly, like silk coming loose from a snag. No screaming. Just threads falling away until nothing was left but the truth. I approved a restructuring plan that demoted him in all but title. He was still CEO on paper, but now every department reported directly to the board. Which meant me. He pushed back once, sending a midnight email riddled with passive-aggressive language. I didn't respond. The silence was its own kind of message. Then he tried appealing to my proxy. Writing soft, pleading messages about wanting to collaborate and get clarity on vision. I sent back one line. Vision is earned, not granted. That shut him up for days. Internally, his team was falling apart. I'd already poached his best designer. Now I set my sights on the head of engineering. Another offer. Another quiet exit. Ryan scrambled to cover, reshuffling junior staff into roles they weren't ready for. The product lagged. The roadmap stalled. Customers grew restless. And every time he tried to fix it, I made sure the tools slipped from his hands. Meanwhile, I expanded Nova's reach. Quietly. Strategically. Through shell companies, I began acquiring smaller tools that complemented my original platform. Tools Ryan once tried to emulate but failed to understand. Soon, Nova wasn't just a competitor. It was a shadow lurking in every pitch meeting he entered. I made sure of it. I sent fake inquiries from Nova to potential Silverloop clients. Made offers on partnerships they were chasing. Created noise that drowned out their signal. And all the while, I kept Ryan just above water. That was the key. He couldn't crash yet. Not until I was ready. I needed him to hope. To believe that maybe, just maybe, he could pull this off. So when he announced a private investor dinner to secure a new round of funding, I encouraged it. Quietly. Through suggestion. Through absence. I let him think he was making moves again. The dinner was held at a rooftop restaurant, candlelit and exclusive. I arrived early, under my alias, and took a seat at the head of the table. Ryan walked in 20 minutes later, surprised to see me. He smiled, nervous and hopeful. "You made it," he said, pouring himself a drink with slightly trembling hands. I didn't respond. Not right away. I let him sweat. Let him fill the silence with small talk and forced charm. One by one, the others arrived, real investors, curious observers, and a few strategic plants I'd placed to steer the evening where I wanted it. Over dinner, Ryan pitched like his life depended on it. Because it did. He spoke of growth, of resilience, of a company that learned from its missteps and was poised to explode. I watched the eyes around the table. Some skeptical. Some intrigued. But all looking at me. Because I held the purse strings. The final question of the night came from one of my plants. "What do you think our anonymous investor sees in you, Ryan?" His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I think," he said carefully, "they saw someone who deserved another shot. Someone who learned." I smiled for the first time. Not because I believed him. But because the final thread was ready to be pulled. I stood slowly. Tapped my glass. And said, "I think it's time you found out what she really saw." The table went silent. Ryan's face drained of color. And I finally said the words I'd waited years to say. "She saw an arrogant man who thought stepping on someone like her wouldn't cost him a thing. And now, she's the reason you're standing here begging for scraps at your own table." His mouth opened. No words came. Only silence. And I let it sit. Heavy. Final. Before walking away, heels clicking like a countdown on polished marble. The headlines hit the tech blogs the next morning like a thunderclap. Mystery investor behind Silverloop is Nova founder Lily Hart. Intern turned tech titan reveals years-long power play. He laughed at her pitch, now she owns his company. Every article used some version of the same photo. Me stepping out of the launch event in a black jumpsuit, red lips, chin high, with Ryan Carter frozen in the background, face pale and stunned. I hadn't planned the timing to be so perfect. But fate has a sense of drama when you feed it the right setup. My press team made sure the story got out. But it didn't need much help. The story sold itself. The underdog intern who was humiliated in a boardroom. The comeback. The shadow investment. The revelation. They called it ruthless. Brilliant. Poetic. Some asked if it was personal. I didn't answer. Let them guess. Let Ryan wonder. I turned off my phone that day. Let the messages pile up. Former colleagues. Reporters. Strangers. All of them desperate to know what it felt like to flip the power dynamic so completely. What it felt like to win. But winning wasn't the right word. It wasn't about points. It was about balance. I wasn't trying to humiliate him the way he humiliated me. I just wanted him to understand the weight of a moment he treated like a joke. And now, he couldn't escape it. I returned to my apartment that night, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. I logged into the Silverloop internal portal. I still had full access. Still had control. Ryan hadn't resigned. Not yet. But he would. The board had already scheduled an emergency vote. Investors were panicking. The staff, from what I'd seen, was split between awe and disbelief. I scrolled through the Slack channels and found one that made me pause. #General, Ryan had posted a message 2 hours ago. "To everyone at Silverloop, no matter what headlines you read, I want you to know I fought for this company. I believed in it. Even when others didn't. I made mistakes. Big ones. But I never stopped trying." It was the first honest thing I'd seen him write in years. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then clicked over to my inbox. One new message. From Ryan. Subject line, just tell me why. I opened it. It was short. You didn't have to destroy me. You already won. Why humiliate me too? I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted him to sit with the question the way I sat with his laughter that day in the boardroom. Alone. Confused. Angry. I knew what was coming next. The press would demand a statement. The board would ask if I wanted to stay involved. Investors would offer new partnerships. Competitors would panic. I would be flooded with opportunities. But none of it mattered. What mattered was that he saw me now. He saw every inch of what I'd built while he wasn't looking. He saw the cost of underestimation. Of arrogance. Of thinking someone small couldn't one day be powerful. I went to bed that night not with triumph, but with silence. Deep. Restful. The kind you only get when something long buried is finally unearthed. The next morning, I dressed in a pale blue blouse and black trousers. Clean. Sharp. Understated. I didn't need to make an entrance anymore. I already owned the room. I walked into the Silver Loop office just before noon. No badge. No escort. No announcement. The front desk assistant looked up, startled, and said my name before she could stop herself. Ms. Hart, I nodded once. I know the way. The walk down the hallway was surreal. Faces turned. Whispers followed. I didn't stop. I opened the conference room door. Inside, the full board. Ryan. Papers on the table. Silence. He stood slowly. You came, he said. His voice was hoarse. I took a seat at the head of the table. The chair was warm. The air was still. I folded my hands and said calmly, let's begin. He didn't speak again. He didn't fight. Not anymore. He signed the resignation letter 10 minutes later. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply collected the papers and stood. On my way out, he said my name. Just once. Quiet. Not defiant. Just, hollow. Lily. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. What happens now? He asked. I looked over my shoulder. Now you learn what it feels like to rebuild from nothing. If you're lucky, maybe you'll get it right the second time. And with that, I walked out. The intern he ignored was gone. The woman who replaced her didn't need applause. She had power. And that was enough. The days that followed were quiet in the way only aftermaths can be. The kind of quiet that hangs in the air after a storm has passed and left the landscape forever changed. Ryan vanished from the headlines as fast as he'd risen into them. A few articles speculated where he might land next. A couple of loyalists tried to defend his legacy. But the world moved on. They always do. Meanwhile, I met with the board. Formally. Professionally. They offered me his seat. His title. His corner office. I declined them all. I didn't need to be CEO of Silver Loop. I'd already rewritten its story. I proposed a restructure. A merger with one of the companies I'd acquired through Nova. One that would absorb Silver Loop's remaining tech, clean house, and move forward without the weight of its past. The board approved it unanimously. They didn't even ask questions. They knew who held the cards now. I stepped down as the public face of Nova soon after. The media buzz would fade, but I didn't want my name to live in headlines anymore. I'd done what I came to do. I'd built my empire. I didn't need to be worshipped. I needed peace. I spent a week in a quiet house by the sea, windows open, wind cold, finally breathing without pressure in my chest. I watched waves break against the shore and thought about the girl I used to be. The intern with trembling hands and a full heart. The girl who thought being underestimated was a permanent condition. She would have never believed she'd one day own the company that once erased her. But the truth is, I didn't become someone new. I became the version of myself that had been buried under doubt and dismissal. The one Ryan tried to smother with a laugh. And when I pulled her back into the light, I let her lead. That's what he never understood. You can't crush a woman who knows who she is. You can mock her, ignore her, replace her, but if she keeps building quietly, she will outlast you. And when she returns, she won't need to raise her voice to remind you who she's become. She'll just own the building you're standing in. 1 week later, Ryan requested a meeting. Not through a lawyer. Not through the board. Directly. A single line in an email. If you have a few minutes, I'd like to apologize. In person. I agreed. Not because I needed an apology. but because I wanted to see what kind of man stood before me now. He arrived at a private lounge I'd chosen. Simple. Neutral. No audience. He wore a suit. Less expensive than before. No flashy watch. He looked smaller. Like the wind had been knocked out of him and never quite returned. I let him sit first. He looked at me like someone trying to find traces of the past and failing. He said, "You look different." I said, "I am." He nodded. Cleared his throat. And finally said, "I was a jerk. That day. In that room. I didn't just laugh at you. I made sure everyone else did too. And I've thought about that moment every single day since the truth came out." I let the silence stretch. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking for understanding. But I wasn't there to give him comfort. I said, "You didn't ruin me, Ryan. You revealed me. And I built something from the wreckage you left behind." He nodded again. Slowly. "What do you want from me?" he asked. It was an honest question. And I gave him an honest answer. "Nothing." He blinked. Confused. "You don't want me to?" "I don't know. Speak at a summit. Post an endorsement. Beg publicly?" "I don't need your guilt," I said. "That's yours to carry. Not mine." We sat there for a few minutes more. Then I stood. I didn't offer a handshake. Just a parting glance. "Next time you think someone is small," I said, "ask yourself if they're just quiet. There's a difference." He didn't follow me out. And I never heard from him again. Silverloop was folded into Nova's network by the end of the quarter. The branding was retired. The systems were restructured. The legacy erased. People remembered the twist, the revenge, the reveal, but eventually, even that faded. And that was fine. I didn't build Nova to get back at Ryan. I built it so no one like him could ever make someone like me feel worthless again. That was the real revenge. Not the headlines. Not the control. But the legacy of something better. Something built not from bitterness, but from belief. Quiet. Steady. Unstoppable. Let them laugh. Let them forget your name. Just make sure they never forget your impact. That's what I did. And in the end, it was louder than anything I ever said out loud.